Tonight, vaccine and mask mandates remain very divisive, some now doing anything they can to get around them, including invoking religion. Is that a legitimate argument? I've done the research, but my guest knows this stuff way better than I do. And
because this man took the gun off my hip. He took the gun off my hip.
When cops got to that gas station, the armed man was waiting and pointing a gun at them and firing. And it is a baffling mystery. A little girl vanishes at a park, and now 2 years later, police are still hopeful that Dulce is still alive somewhere. They need your help. Dan Abrams Live starts right now. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. You know, one of the questions I have never quite understood in the big vaccine mandate debate is exactly who qualifies for a religious exemption from mask or vaccine mandates, and what, if any, religions actually prohibit them? Those are the questions I've had since President Biden announced federal vaccination mandates this summer. And then the issue was raised in a public way when Washington State University head football coach Nick Rolovich was fired Monday for failing to comply with the state's COVID vaccine mandate. Rolovich had applied for a religious exemption to the mandate, citing his Catholic faith. That was rejected. The school's athletic director, Pat Chun, called the decision to deny the request simple. An attorney for Rolovich said Wednesday that he plans to sue the university for illegal termination and accused Chun of discriminatory and vindictive behavior. But what's interesting is that it actually seems to depend not just on your religion, but where you live. Perhaps if the coach would still have a job if he coached in a state like Oregon, where 11% of the applicants have been granted religious exemptions to the COVID jabs. Or in Ohio, school officials in suburban Columbus have granted more than 160 applications for religious exemptions to mask mandates after they were signed by one mom who'd been ordained as a minister in the Universal Life Church, a process that takes about a minute to complete online. The right to request a religious exemption was established as part of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which protects workers from discrimination on the basis of religion, among other things. However, it turns out that very few religions, including most sects of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, have any real doctrinal reasons for not believing in immunizations. According to research from Vanderbilt University Medical Center, just a handful of denominations, few of them with large followings, have any kind of theological objection to vaccination. While some Catholics have been critical of the COVID vaccine because testing was conducted using cell lines derived from aborted fetuses, the church itself, including Pope Francis, have backed vaccines and urged worshipers to get the shots. And it's worth noting here that none of the approved COVID-19 vaccines contain fetal cells, and the use of fetal cell lines is commonplace in pharmaceutical research. Even sects that traditionally avoid modern medicine on the basis that it interferes with divine providence, like the Dutch Reformed Church or the Church of Christ Scientist, have some followers that accept vaccines as a gift from God to be used with gratitude. So just what warrants religious exemptions from vaccine mandates? And should states and employers accommodate these kinds of objections? To find out, let's bring in Bernard Prosak. He's the director of the McGowan Center for Ethics and Social Responsibility at King's College in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. His essay is called What Warrants Religious Exemption from COVID Vaccine Mandates. It's now available from the Hastings Center Bioethics Forum. Thank you very much for coming on the program. Appreciate it. All right, so let me start with the basic question of what does it mean to have a religious objection? What do you have to show? What do you have to prove?
That's a very good question. So what you need to show is that you have a sincere objection on moral grounds to vaccination. So it can't just be you've got a hesitation. It can't just be that you've got worry about the science, let's say. It has to be instead that you make a judgment that you shouldn't be vaccinated and you find that judgment to be based on a reason that is morally binding. So religion here is understood really quite broadly, and this goes back in this country several decades already. The relevant U.S. Supreme Court cases are the Seeger and Welsh cases from the Vietnam era, so 1965 and 1970. In those cases, you had conscientious objectors who were not traditional religious believers, but they said they were opposed to participation in war. And the court decided that because they had these beliefs that functioned similar to religious beliefs in the lives of traditional believers, those conscientious objections should be accommodated. So that's
so
a very broad.
Let me ask you about the fact that states apparently are differing in, I guess, broadly defining what is a valid religious objection, because it seems that some states are accepting it more readily than others.
Yes. Now, the background, though, is the same. The background is the Title VII of the U.S. Civil Rights Act of 1964, as it's interpreted by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And there again, religion is understood very broadly against the background of those Seeger and Welsh decisions back in 1965 and 1970. But you have different federal courts taking different positions. So in New York, the federal court has said that New York needs to allow religious exemptions, whereas in Maine, the federal court has said that no, Maine need not allow these religious exemptions. So this is still being worked out. I mean, it's being worked out not only state by state, but employer by employer, for that matter, as employers.
And is it,
yeah.
Is it also, I assume it's also religion by religion. Are there any religions where there's a stronger argument than others?
You know, it really doesn't matter whether your particular religion, let's say you profess, I don't know, Catholicism or you know, you're a mainline Protestant or a Jew or a Muslim. It doesn't matter whether, you know, your religious leaders, the Pope, the bishop, so on and so forth, agree that there is reason to object. So under U.S. law, as it's interpreted by the EEOC, it's just a matter of whether you have a conscientious objection, sincerely held belief that you know, getting vaccinated would be wrong for you to do. It's got to be sincere. It's got to be an objection of conscience too, which again isn't just a hesitation or a worry about the science.
All right, Bernard Prusak, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. This is a really interesting topic, and appreciate your insights. Coming up.
Thanks for having me.
I refuse to accept that American political centrism and moderation is dead. We talk to a familiar face who isn't giving up hope either. Former vice presidential nominee and Senator Joe Lieberman. As we wrap up one of our first weeks on the air, it is my hope that by now I've made the editorial viewpoint of this show crystal clear. I am fundamentally opposed to extremists on both sides. I believe in political moderation, and I know that the best way forward is for all of us to try to compromise, try to get things like the bipartisan infrastructure bill done and passed. But before there was Joe Manchin or Kristen Sinema or Susan Collins and others taking center stage as the critical moderates, Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman was viewed in the same vein. He spent 4 terms in the Senate fighting against political gridlock like we see today. And he believes, like I do, that despite the partisan divide in our current discourse, that there is hope for the future. He is the author of the new book called The Centrist Solution: How We Made Government Work and How We Can Make It Work Again. And the former senator from Connecticut and vice presidential candidate joins us now. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Appreciate it. So I'm going to ask you.
Thanks for what you said. And that's a point of view that's not reflected enough in the media today. So I doubly appreciate it.
Isn't it crazy what's happening in the media right now? I mean, the notion that you're not doing a show that is talking nonstop about Donald Trump all the time, as you see on CNN and MSNBC, or on Fox about the horrors of Joe Biden every night, and you actually talk about things that, hey, maybe affect people's lives, or maybe people will be interested in without demonizing people. You know, it is crazy that this is one of the few shows that does that.
I know. I wish you well. You know, I hate to say it, but it feels to me like the cable news networks are not making a news judgment, but making a business judgment that if they're left or right, they can carve out an audience and make some money. But they don't do our country any service. So I wish you well in staking out a ground in the middle, because the truth is, I'm convinced that that's where most of the people in this country are, but they're not as loud, organized as people on the left or right.
Well, that's the problem, right? When's the last time you saw sort of an angry centrist mob demanding justice of whatever it is? Yeah. You know, the angry centrists, you know, they sit at home and throw stuff at their TV, and that's about it. And that's part of the problem.
Right. So I'm an angry centrist, but I'm just like most of America, but I have the opportunity to write this book based on my knowledge of American history and my 24 years in the Senate and say, hey, look, this is the solution to the problem. Come to the center, whether you're left or right or Democrat, Republican, independent, moderate. Throughout our history and throughout the 24 years in cases that I talk about, it's always happened that way. You got to meet with the other side, talk to them, reason with them, negotiate, compromise. You never get everything you want, but you get a lot more than anybody in Congress is getting these days because they're so divided. So the centrist solution is about how to do it. Yeah.
So let me ask you, is your book utopian or is it practical? Meaning, you know, I worry that those of us sort of in the middle say, well, you know, we should come together. And people say, yeah, we should come together. And then people don't come together. Is there actually hope for those of us who are more moderate to say, yes, we actually, and I'm not saying hope in the sort of like theoretical sense. Is there practical hope that this is going to work?
Yes, because, I mean, and that's why I wanted to tell these stories. These are not so long ago. They begin in 1990. Most recent stories that I tell of successful, bipartisan, centrist solutions to big problems, varied environment, national security, homeland security, balanced budget, gay rights, all happened because we came to the center and worked across party lines. There's no mystery to it. The challenge today, Dan, as you well know, is the countervailing forces that are pulling people apart, pulling parties apart. One of them is the media we talked about. Another is the gerrymandering of the House districts particularly. Another is the influence of big money in politics. Very little of it is given philanthropically. Some of it, a lot of it is given by special interests. And a lot of it by ideological interest to expect the congressmen and senators they give it to remember where they got the money. And that doesn't work to enable members of Congress when they get there to do what most of them want to do, which is work together to get something done. So, no, I think, and I'm telling really practical stories in this book about how Republicans and Democrats compromise to get things done.
But are we at a fundamentally different point than we were, even in these recent stories that you share in your book? Are we at a time now in the post-Donald Trump era where the solutions, the compromise, the examples you're going to give are just not relevant today?
Yeah, I obviously I hope not, and I think
I hope not too.
Yeah, Donald Trump was a really interesting story. I mean, stated very simplistically. His election was a response to exactly what we're talking about. People fed up with the government, thinking, okay, you know, he's a successful businessman. He's not a politician, and that's why he got elected, in my opinion. And then he made it worse. I mean, he just fed on the division and made the division even deeper, and the disrespect for law, of course. Just shocking. So then Joe Biden comes along, and I think he's elected in good measure because people know that as a senator, he did work across party lines as a centrist. They got a lot done. But so far, the left wing of the Democratic Party has had too much influence on him, and he hasn't been the Joe Biden that I served with for 24 years. I think he's really stepped into this infrastructure situation now, and he's trying to negotiate an agreement. Of course, I agree with you. They should have passed a bipartisan infrastructure reform bill, passed by 69 votes in the Senate with Schumer and McConnell supporting it, goes to the House, and the so-called House Progressive Caucus holds it up until they get their $3.5 trillion bill with programs most people have not even looked at, let alone evaluated. So Biden really has to step in. This gets better, to answer your question, Dan, with leadership from the top. And if that doesn't happen, with the kind of independence and bipartisanship that in both houses led to the bipartisan infrastructure reform bill, which was then adopted in the Senate.
All right. Well, look, I think, got to continue with this angry middle movement where we express our enormous frustration. And look, I've said almost exactly what you said about the infrastructure bill on this show previously, and about the impact of the far left on that. But sometimes I feel like, I am yelling in general into thin air, and which is why I wanted to have you on the show, which is why I think that your book, The Centrist Solution, is important. I think that people need to look at this and hope that it is relevant today. I am not giving up. You are not giving up. Good
No
luck
way.
With the book tour.
You give me hope, and let's be angry because
yes.
we are angry, but too many people like us are quiet. So you and I have the opportunity to make our voices heard. I appreciate what you're doing. I wish you well on the show.
Thank you very much, Senator Lieberman. Appreciate your time.
See you again. Take care.
Coming up, couples that try to sell U.S. nuclear submarine secrets together stay together. Wait, that's not the saying. This husband and wife now have matching mugshots and not guilty pleas in their alleged attempt to become spies in a case with cache, shredded documents, and an alleged to-go bag. Coming up. Welcome back. Spies next door. A nuclear engineer and a private school teacher charged with espionage, accused of trying to sell U.S. nuclear submarine secrets to an unnamed foreign power. It all sounds like a plot out of The Americans. The FBI says Jonathan and Diana Toby of Annapolis, Maryland, tried to get $5 million in cryptocurrency for the information, but their contact turned out to actually be an undercover agent. The Bureau said Diana acted as a lookout as Jonathan dropped off a memory card wrapped in a bag and hidden in a peanut butter sandwich on a trail in West Virginia. During a bond hearing for Diana this week, the FBI said they searched the couple's home and found shredded documents, their children's passports prepared for a trip, and more than $11,000 in cash, $100 bills wrapped in rubber bands. There was also a bag with a computer, a storage drive, and latex gloves. A judge on Thursday ruled that Diana will be held pending trial, citing the, quote, weight of the evidence against her, and said that her actions demonstrate that the defendant is a danger to every community and our national security. Jonathan waived his right to a hearing. Both face life in prison if convicted. Joining me now with more on this wild case is Justin Fenton, a reporter for the Baltimore Sun who has been all over the story. He's the author of We Own This City, a true story of crime, cops, and corruption. Justin, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. Let me start with how this all went down. The couple write a letter to some foreign country, which we don't know of, looking to sell their information, and then the FBI get tipped off?
Yeah, it starts with a letter that's written in April of 2020, where the FBI alleges Jonathan Toby reached out to, like you said, an unnamed country and said he had secrets to sell. It's not clear what his motivations were other than money, but the letter got pretty much hand-delivered to an FBI legal attaché in that foreign country, who then redirected it back to Washington, and they started investigating, engaging with the Tobys over secure channels.
Do we know why they can't disclose which country it is?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. We were hoping that would come out of the detention hearing. There may be some clues in that they said that the Tobys had talked about over encrypted messaging services moving to Europe, but there's been no disclosure of the country. We're not sure why that is.
You mentioned encrypted messaging. Is that the most incriminating evidence against them? I mean, for the judge to have ruled that she's going to be held pending trial, citing the overwhelming nature of the evidence, is that primarily because of these encrypted texts?
Yeah, I think that they are concerned that there are classified documents that they have not yet located. Jonathan Toby allegedly said that he had 51 packets, each of 100 pages of classified documents that he carefully over the years had been smuggling out of the Navy Yard, and they don't know where those are. They also don't know where the money that they paid to the Tobys is, and they're afraid that if either one of them were to get out, they would log into internet-based accounts and either destroy things or move things to places where they perhaps can't be seized or tracked. But I think the overwhelming evidence really is the fact that they were observed and videotaped making these dead drops. They went to great lengths to try to cover their tracks. They would park a mile away and dress up in hiking clothes and have a camera and look like they're out for a hike. But really, they were trying to catch and see if anybody was on their trail, and they were observed making these drops. Mrs. Toby's attorney says she didn't know what was going on. The FBI agent on the stand said that's hard to believe, but that's the argument they're going to make. There's no evidence that she knew what was going on.
So it sounds like her defense is going to be different from his defense, right? Her defense is she wasn't involved, she didn't know about it, etc.
Yeah, they're saying that she's innocent, and that at a bare minimum at the moment, they don't have any evidence to show that she knew. The defense attorney actually criticized the FBI, said you should have done more. You should have bugged their house. You should have wiretapped their phones. Then we would know what kind of conversations they were having. And so far, those encrypted messages don't really apparently reveal them discussing this directly, although there are discussions about fleeing the country, about plan A and plan B. He says, the attorney says that's because she was anti-Trump and wanted to leave the country if he was going to be elected again. So we'll have to see what else they dig up in those digital conversations.
And also part of their defense is that they were just going to prepare to go on a family trip, right? And that's why the passports, et cetera, are ready to go?
Yeah, although the trip was planned for the spring and they were getting expedited passports. So again, that's going to be a hurdle they're going to have to climb. But it seems as though at the moment, we haven't heard anything from Jonathan Toby's attorney. He waived his hearing, but the Mrs. Toby's attorney was saying, she didn't know. If he was doing this, he was doing it on his own, and she wasn't aware.
Justin Fenton, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up.
Drop the gun, sir. Sir, drop the gun.
The suspect there refusing to put down his gun, sparking a shootout at a gas station. Sean Sticks Larkin joins us next to break down this terrifying encounter caught on police body cam. Time for our police cam segment showing the dangers officers face every day across the country. We're about to see what happened when a man grabbed someone else's gun at a gas station, ran outside, started pointing it at people. 3 officers, including one on a bike, responded.
Where? Right there, look, behind me. He's got it. Dave, put the gun down. Drop the gun. Drop the gun. Right now we got him here in the gas station. He's got the gun in his left hand. Dude, sir, get out of here. Drop the gun, sir. Drop the gun, sir. Sir, drop the gun. Sir, drop the gun for me, please. Stay. Sir, stay down. Stay down. Sir, just stay down for me, please. He's still got the gun. Oh, he'll be hit. He's been hit. His gun's still right by him. Yeah, this guy's good. Dave, he's bleeding out. All right, we're moving into recovery. We're going to need medical ASAP.
Now, the person you saw on the ground was actually a bystander. A man in Milwaukee calls 911 saying that Broderick Shelton stole his gun while he was in the store. Shelton went outside, started pointing the gun at people. 3 officers responded, and Shelton shot at them with a customer in the line of fire. The officers fired back, eventually killing Shelton. Bullets hit the customer's car and a nearby home. No officers or bystanders were injured. Here to break it down is retired police lieutenant and former co-host of Live PD, Sean Sticks Larkin. Sean, good to see you again. All right, I'm going to ask our control room to play the video as you talk about some of this, because it was a little bit confusing at first. Guy grabs someone else's gun, points it at people, shoots it at officers, but there was someone on the ground in front, and I want you to talk about the significance of that bystander being there as well.
Yeah, the gentleman that we actually see down on the ground near the officer, and you can see in the officer's shadow, the car that you see at the gas pump there, that's the gentleman that we later see down on the ground. He was an innocent bystander. At one point in this video we see from the story, he's actually underneath the hood of his car, and he starts to get into his car to leave when the suspect actually points the gun directly at him over in his direction. And, the officer showed a lot of restraint, in my opinion, because he was pointing a gun at an innocent person, and they did not start to shoot at all then. The suspect actually puts the gun down and then fires at the officers a short time later, which starts the volley of gunfire that we hear. One of the officers, who's the first one that arrives on scene that shows up on the bicycle, he actually strategically moves himself in what we call an L shape with another officer. That way we don't have a crossfire shooting, an officer at another officer. That allows, just a better focal point of on the suspect. What is worrisome about that at times, you've obviously got people inside this store, at least an employee and possibly other patrons as well.
Well, and it seems that the customer there, the person who was on the ground, didn't even quite realize what was happening, right? And so that makes the situation that much more dangerous for the officers, because they have to make sure that that person doesn't do anything which distracts them.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly it. When you have somebody out in a gas station parking lot with a gun, in broad daylight, in the beginning of the video, there's 2 civilians actually walking on the sidewalk. You've got another innocent citizen, as we mentioned, out at the car at the gas pumps. We know for sure you've at least got somebody working in the gas station and possibly other people in there. And so these officers have to quickly evaluate, who's out there, who's the innocent people that they need to protect besides themselves. Another thing you have to think about is this guy going to try to take somebody at the car as a hostage? Is he going to go into the store, which we can't let that happen. I know of other incidents around the country, including one that happened here in Tulsa, where a person was in the parking lot armed and tried to go inside the store, and the officers had to use deadly force to stop that to prevent a potential hostage.
Let's watch a little clip of that again, just one of the key points in this incident. One of the things that struck me, Sticks, is that officer on the bike didn't seem to have the ability to get cover either.
No, and he didn't. He ends up firing just a few rounds as he's moving over to where the innocent citizen is. He does have a vehicle in front of him. He's got some of the gas pumps that he potentially could, use. They're not going to explode like we see in the movies if one of them is hit. But he focuses on that guy that's down on the ground. He's trying to tell him to stay down. And one other thing I want to point out, you hear all these shots fired. The suspect in this incident actually fired 16 times. And it wasn't just a constant, 16 rounds. He was shooting back and forth between the officers, and the officers were kind of evaluating and firing until he was stopped as a threat.
Oh, I'm going to take a deep breath and say thank you, Sean Larkin. Appreciate it.
As always, Dan.
Have you seen Dulce? Just 5 years old when she vanished at a park. Now, 2 years later, police believe she's still alive. How you can help find her. Coming up next. Each Friday here on the show, we ask for your help to find a missing child. This week, we focus on Dulce Alaves, 7 years old, from Bridgeton, New Jersey. Dulce vanished from Bridgeton City Park on September 16, 2019. Investigators say she was playing with her little brother on the swings. He returned alone to their mother, who was sitting in a car nearby. Dulce was only 5 at the time. Take a look at these two photos. Police have released photos of what they believe she would look like today. The one on the left, released last year as a 6-year-old, and the one on your right, released last month as a 7-year-old. Meanwhile, police believe she is still alive.
We're still optimistic the child's alive, and we're operating on that premise.
Detectives said they believe Dulce was taken by a light-skinned Hispanic male, 5'6" to 5'8", with thin build and facial acne. Local law enforcement urges anyone with any information, please come forward. There's a reward of $75,000 being offered for any information that leads to finding Dulce. Joining me now is Angeline Hartman, the media director for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Angeline, as always, thank you for coming back on the show. First of all, walk us through Dulce's disappearance.
Dan, this happens in broad daylight, and we're talking about a mom and 3 children all together. So this is the scenario. Just before 4 o'clock, mom is with Dulce, who at the time is 5 years old, as you mentioned, Dulce's brother, who's 3 years old, and then another child, a relative. She's 8 years old. So mom and the 3 kids go to a store near the park. And in that store, you can see there's store surveillance video. Dulce's happy. She's with the family. The kids get ice cream. You can see exactly what she's wearing in the surveillance video. And you can see, like I said, everybody's happy. So they leave the store. A few minutes later, after 4 o'clock, they're at the park. Mom stays inside the car with the 8-year-old. And Dulce and her younger brother leave to go play at the park at the swings. And it's pretty close to the car. Mom can see what's happening. She's a little distracted sometimes with the 8-year-old. A few minutes later, let's call it 10 minutes, the brother comes back, Dulce's younger brother, and he's crying. He says Dulce's not there. She's gone. He's upset about his ice cream, and she's not playing with him. And she goes back out there. At first, she's thinking Dulce's hiding, playing hide and seek. The brother says she went behind a building. She doesn't come out. They can't find her. So by 5 o'clock, after everybody has searched, they're panicking now, and they call police. It's been a long 2 years, and I can tell you that investigators have been working on this case, and they say that, they've come to know Dulce as their own daughter. And you heard the police chief there, Dan, say that they believe that she is alive. That's what they're operating under.
Well, that's, obviously very encouraging. Do you have any sense of what kind of leads they may have in the case? What makes them believe she's still alive?
They're not saying exactly, Dan, but this is what they told me just today, that they are working on this case every single day. And so that says they have something to work with. It's definitely not a cold case. In the last 2 years, there have been not hundreds, but thousands of tips called in. But they definitely have a direction and something that they're working on. Obviously, they won't say. So that's a good news.
talk about the age progression photographs. How accurate are they?
Sure. Well, you know, we won't know how accurate they are until she's found. But those age progression photos were done by our team. We have a team of forensic artists at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. One is a little bit old, a version of her older, and one is her younger. And, you know, there was just a little bit of discussion of which one they should go with. And so they released both last month. You know, we've been doing this since 1999 and have done thousands of age progression photos. There are stories we can tell you of age progression photos that have been done where they are on the money. Somebody has looked at that photo and says, I recognize this child here, or that sparked something and this person looks familiar. But really, these age progression photos are meant to be a likeness of what this child might look like today. The key is to keep the focus of Dulce out in the media. This is a tool for law enforcement to get people talking and to get people to pay attention to what she might look like today, to remind them that we're looking now for a 7-year-old Dulce, not a 5-year-old Dulce.
Mm-hmm. And very quickly, do they think, or do they have any sense of whether she may have known the person who took her?
They're not saying that either. I mean, you saw that suspect composite, you know, that's somebody with close to the investigation told me that is, you know, that was information used early on to put together that composite. So it's unclear how important that is to the investigation now. Of course, they want to keep it out there because they don't want to be narrowly focused, but that definitely has not led them to where they need to be.
Yeah. All right, Angeline, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. If you know anything about Dulce's whereabouts, please call 1-800-THE-LOST. That's 1-800-843-5678. Oh, all right, I gotta, again, take a deep breath and pause and go on to other stories.